Hello, Year 4. Welcome to session 3 of this week's author work on aliens. So today we're going to look at a day in the life of. Exploring planets is very exciting. Every time I visit a planet, I make sure that I keep my explorer's log up to date. It's a bit like a diary and is where I write down what has happened on my visits. Here is my entry from my visit to Zargon 9 in the Jumula system. Yesterday was the most unbelievable day of exploring yet. It all started when I landed on Zargon 9. It was the first time I'd ever visited the Jumula system, and I wasn't expecting to see such wonderful sights. Excitedly, I put on my exploring suit and gravity boots, because there is only 20% gravity on the planet. I set out at 09:45 AM space-time. First, I visited the crystal waterfalls and took samples of the purple liquid that cascaded down the falls. After that, I studied the tiny creatures that were teeming through the hard red soil that covered the landscape. They looked rather like earth spiders, but had 12 legs and tiny horns on their heads. Carefully, I scooped up 2 of them to take back to the ship. Next, I took measurements of wind speed and recorded a temperature of 1004 degrees around the Funnel volcano, which is like a normal volcano, but the shape of a tall, slim tube. After the volcano trip, I walked across the bubbling sludge plains that were covered in green mud. It was easy to walk on, but it wobbled and rippled if I went too fast. Finally, I headed back to the ship because it was getting late. When I got in, I recorded my findings and stored my samples in the lab. Tomorrow, I will travel to Zargon 10. Now, at this point, I'd like you to pause and on a piece of paper design Zargon 10. What would you be able to see as you hover over it in a spaceship? What special features will it have? Label the map to show what is on this planet. You can use some ideas from Zargon 9 to help you. Try to draw it in the style of this map, but make it look much more like an alien planet. Now imagine you've explored Zargon 10 and are ready to write your log. Follow the same pattern as me and use this planner to jot down some ideas. So into each box, just put the notes of your ideas. Your introduction, when did it happen, just a summary of the day and tell the reader something interesting. And then move on to what did you do before you set off. And then they've given you space for lots of events. It's up to you how many you choose, but I would suggest you try and do 3. And then finally, round off your report and you tell the reader where you're going to go next. Here's my notes. So, last week I visited Zargon 10. It was incredibly hot and wet, frightening experience, glad of my protective suit. As you can see, I'm not writing complete sentences, I'm just noting down my ideas. So what I did first was to put on my core suit, an anti-gravity pack, and then give the reason, because the gravity is 5 times stronger. Then I've described where I landed first and what I did, what happened next, what happened after that, and almost how my visit finished, before saying about going back to the ship, rounding off the day, and what I'm going to do next. Once you've written your notes, then you need to turn them into complete sentences. They've given you some examples and they're suggesting you use and but to add detail. So, for example, I visited the crystal waterfalls and took samples of the flowing purple liquid. They looked rather like earth spiders, but had 12 legs and tiny horns on their heads. So from my notes, I might type this sentence. I landed on an area of flat purple rock and noticed there was a sickly green river flowing in the distance. And then the sentence with but. The creatures looked like wood lice, but had 4 pairs of 3 legs. When or how. A log uses sentence signposts to tell the reader when or how something is happening. The ones used in the log are known technically as fronted adverbials, adverbs or phrases beginning with adverbs that are placed at the front of the sentences. So when, you can use first, next, after that, then, afterwards, when I got in, when I got up, or how something was done. Carefully, excitedly, slowly, without stopping, quickly, bravely, greedily. Their examples are: next I took measurements of wind speed, and carefully I scooped up 2 of them to take back to the ship. So my 2 examples are: before I went outside, I put on my cool suit and my anti-gravity pack. And after that, I used my auto-translate to talk to them. Now, some of you may notice that my first sentence, I'm actually using an adverbial phrase rather than just a fronted adverbial. But if you just use fronted adverbials, that's fine. Now, the next thing we need to do is to explain, to give some explanation as to why we were doing certain things. So in their example, finally I headed back to the ship because it was getting late. So now I'd like to take sentences from your ideas, from your notes, but add because to explain why you've done something. And again, remember to start your sentence with a fronted adverbial. And their 2 examples are: first, I packed my metal umbrella because the planet has acid rain, and excitedly, I captured the insects because I wanted to study them. Here's a couple from my notes. So, before I went outside, there's that adverbial phrase again. Before I went outside, I put on my cool suit and my anti-gravity pack because the gravity on Zargon 10 is 5 times stronger than I am used to. And then after that, they gave me some strange gifts, so I gave them my spare suit radio because I wasn't using it. So in both those sentences, I've given a reason for the earlier information. Now all that's left is for you to write your log. Use your plan, and you can use the model for Zargon 9 or my ideas if it helps, to draft your log onto a separate piece of paper. Remember to add detail to your sentences using and or but, add explanation to your sentences using because, use fronted adverbials like after that to start some sentences. Check your capital letters at the start of sentences, your full stops at the end, and commas after your fronted adverbials. And finally, don't forget to read your work and check it flows and makes sense. Now, if you want to do it differently, I have set a to-do in Purple Mash for a diary entry, and you're quite welcome to type it in there and then send it to me and I will have a look at it. Okay, so here's my completed piece of work. Last week I visited Zargon 10. The planet was incredibly hot and wet. It was a frightening experience because it was so hot, and I was glad of my protective suit. Before I went outside, I put on my cool suit and my anti-gravity pack because the gravity on Zargon 10 is 5 times stronger than I am used to. First, I landed on a flat area that was made of purple rock with a sickly green river flowing over it. I took samples of the rock and the liquid. Next, I went into a deep cave. It was cooler inside, but I was still glad of my suit. Inside was a miniature city with lots of woodlice type creatures running around. After that, I used my auto-translate to talk to them. They didn't believe that I came from outside. Eventually I convinced them I had, and they explained their way of life. It was very different to mine. Then they gave me some strange gifts, so I gave them my spare suit radio because I wasn't using it. Next, I went back to the surface and took some pictures of a beautiful green and blue sunset. Finally, I went back to my ship and put everything away. Next is my visit to Gremulin 7. And that's it for today. I hope that your writing is good, and remember, if you do it in Purple Mash, you can send it to me to look at, and I can send you my thoughts on it back. Tomorrow I will do the final session for this week, and I'll see you then. Bye.